the mount. Where's my mount?
Die, you
I didn't get any of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Blizzard have seen right to bless us with a hard mode for Mechagon. And taking on King Mechagon in this hard mode is going to lead to a ton of frustration and anger. But I've been watching quite a few streams of people trying this and failing it. So I'm here to provide you some tips because they were all making the same mistakes that led to them blaming each other. This is one of those fights that's going to just end up with you blaming each other, turning into a fight, but there's no need. There's a lot of ways you can make this easier for yourself. So if you don't know how to activate the hard mode, you do the previous bosses on hard mode, and that will present you with a button. You push the button at the end, and that will start the destruct sequence. Now, throughout the fight, periodically on the side, about every 35 energy, you're going to see a series of colours pop up on the left and right-hand side of the room. And these will appear in an order, so it'll be like purple, red, blue, yellow. And then the players have to input that code again when all the symbols reappear shortly after in the correct order extremely quickly. You have about 5 seconds to do it. And once that's put in, then you can carry on with the fight. So the fight will be continuing to do all its very dangerous mechanics while you're doing this, and this is what's leading to a lot of these problems. Now, I will say here, to make this easier, having a more ranged group makes this so much easier. The first time I did it, I've done this twice now. The first time I did this, we had 2 melee, including a Death Knight, who ended up, even though they're geared to the teeth, with ludicrously low damage because of the amount of downtime they had running away from the boss, waiting to clicking, then running back, doing a bit of damage for a bit, and then having to leave again in order to press the button. It leads to a really awful scenario. The second time I did it was with a full ranged comp, 2 hunters and me on my mage. We decimated this and had about 3 less codes to input. So that is something you want to bear in mind, okay? Now, let's get the first thing out of the way. Some people are going to be shit at this. They're going to panic. They're going to struggle. They're not going to understand it. Having voice comms is a massive bonus here. You can do it without voice comms. Some of my friends have told me how they did it without voice comms, having macros in order to press the names of who had done things so they could do it without voice comms. I would recommend use in-game voice. It's not that bad. We've used in-game voice several times on the stream. It works really well. There's no reason not to in modern gaming really to communicate, but I know some people don't like it. Just be aware you're going to have to make some sort of macro system or something because the buttons have to be pressed really, really quickly. We've had some delays where we were trying to take our time and make sure we got it right, and you simply do not have enough time to put the code in, and you're going to lead to a wipe. If you fail the code at any point, it's an instantaneous wipe. Okay? So, getting that out of the way, some people are going to be shit at it. They're going to fail, they're going to struggle, they're going to panic. They're just not going to... They're just going to be panicking and press the wrong button. That's going to happen. But that doesn't mean we can't make it easier. That does not mean we can't make it easier. First things first. The most difficult aspect of this, if your guys are comfortable putting the code in, is its overlaps with the rest of the mechanics. Let's start in phase 1. So in phase 1, you're going to fight this aerial unit. The amount of tanks I've seen today on stream who don't realize the very simple thing that when the takeoff mechanic occurs and this aerial unit takes to the sky, it activates a spell called Cutting Beam, where it's going to target a player and then it's going to move in a straight line towards them, AoEing the floor. Tanks need to keep this as far away from the buttons as possible, so when that phase starts, the Cutting Beam cannot reach those players. Yellow.
Yellow, purple,
blue, green.
I'm being cutting.
Sorry. Yellow. Purple.
Yellow, done.
Oh no, that might just pretty much had what happened to me. Like,
I saw so many groups wiping today because the Cutting Beam targeted a player. The tank had tanked the thing in the middle of the room, and it had just gone straight to where they were trying to press their button, and they physically couldn't do it. Simultaneously, I saw the same players blaming that person for just press the button. It's not that hard. This is one of those things you're going to have is some morons who aren't paying attention to what's actually happening, causing all these problems. I often saw the tank blaming the range, like, this is what you need to do. Can you just get it done? While simultaneously making it so that guy couldn't press the button, right? Lots of that going on. Tanks need to keep it at the far end of the room away from the buttons so that the casters and the healer are more than free to press their button, okay? Having said that, who's best at organizing it? So I just said then about having voice comms. Your tanks shouldn't be involved here. It's going to come down to the 3 DPS and the healer. And the reason for this is that in the second phase, when they're actually tanking the boss, the camera angles the tank needs to see in order to be able to actually see what code approaches is awful. It's absolutely terrible. It's really, really bad. And they're not going to be able to realistically come away from the boss, press a button, and then go back to the boss, because if nobody's in melee range, the boss is just going to annihilate the entire group, right? So the tank is kind of out of this picture. It's some groups I saw using the tank for phase 1 and then not in phase 2. That makes very little sense to me. Just have the group get comfortable with it, doing it over and over again. This is going to take several wipes. I can tell you, even as like a top raid team in the world, it still took us like 5 or 6 goes to get this correct, while figuring out the best solution for us. So that's something you want to bear in mind, is the tank really shouldn't be involved. Organize it between the 4 remaining members of the party, and ideally assign each of them to a specific spot. You can do one person can do both sides, but it's way harder, and it comes down to a little bit of RNG. If you have, say, one on the right-hand side of the room and one on the left-hand side of the room, then the guy, if you have one player on the right-hand side of the room, then he clearly has enough time to press his button, move to the other one while the other guy does his button, and then press that, and so on and so forth. But ideally, you want to have set positions at the start and say, this is your place, this is your place, this is your place, and this is your place. Now, I want to move on to how you actually call this, because in both of the groups I did it with, we used totally different systems because it was better for that group. Why? I don't really know, but it was just a case of one system worked for one group, one system worked for another. So in group 1, the first group we did, we just called the colors out. So it would go purple, red, yellow, green. So I would stand sort of close to my button. I would wait for my color to pop up, which changes, by the way. Well, it can be, but it changes colors. So my corner, let's say I had the first on the right-hand side, it could be yellow, it could be red, it could be blue, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just the order the buttons, the colors flashed up. That's what matters there. So I would just wait for my color and then be like, red, mine's red, click red. We tried that in the second group and it really just wasn't working. It was just the way it was. It just wasn't working at all. We switched to just saying the names of the person. Now, that's more useful in a guild team, I think. If you've got a set number of players, if you've got a guild team or you've got a usual mythic team, mythic dungeon team, you're probably going to find that easier to say things like Bill, Ted, Mike, Andy, done, right? You're going to find that way easier because you're just going to go through the order and work it out that way. Another group have used 1, 2, 3, 4. I find 1, 2, 3, 4 to be very distracting. Personally, I don't think that works out too well because there's no corroboration in-game. At least with the color system, which worked for us in group 1, your color appears. So if someone says red and red's in front of you, your brain instantly goes, that's red, and you just click it. 1, 2, 3, 4, I find less useful because there's nothing in game to associate it with. But if you find that easier, all I'm saying here, my main point is don't be like, I did it last time, this is how we did it. I can tell you for a fact that in our second group, we tried to use the group 1 strategy and we struggled with it for some reason. However, when we switched to names, we killed it the next pull very easily. We just was like, it was so much easier for that group just to use player names. And that's something you want to bear in mind as well. The next aspect of this is that it will overlap with very dangerous mechanics. Namely, the robotic orbs will move to your location when you need to press the button. And this means you're going to die. It's as simple as that. This means you're going to die. Now, the way you counter this, and I saw so many groups not figuring this out and causing themselves so much trouble, is that it moves to where you're stood. That's what happens. So you don't stand next to your button just waiting for it to appear because there's quite a delay between it showing the code and your actual button appearing. So just stand 5 or 6 yards away so that you can move to your button almost instantly. But when the orb moves to your location, it's not going to land where you need to be to press the button. It's really that easy, and so many groups aren't doing it. So many groups are just saying, right, you need to press red soon, so they go and stand next to where their button will be, and they just stand there. And guess what? The orb goes, it's time for me to move, moves directly to them, kills them, didn't press the button, it's a wipe. It's as simple as that. Just stand a few yards away from where the button will be, and just wait. And when it's time to click, just move towards the button. Your button will appear, click it, and just keep moving out the way. And you're not going to have any trouble with that at all, right? The second one is the magnetic arm. Now, I will point out here, the groups I saw actually succeed in doing this got basically really lucky pulls. And that was unquestionably what happened. So they got pulls where the orbs didn't move to them while they were pressing the button. And they also had magnetic arms, which suck you towards them. And they do more damage to you the closer you are to the arm. Which means that if the magnetic arm appears right near a button, that person is going to take heavy, heavy damage.
Purple, yellow, blue, green.
Oh, it's fucking driving me
Dude,
away.
really? Next to the button. And I'll point out here, as somebody who has healed this, There is so much damage going on in this fight. We had a system which is very helpful specifically for things like during the magnetic arm and during the takeoff phase where the whole room's being AoE'd and he's putting out the Giga Zap, which does incredible damage. That if you have some way of blocking that damage, so you have anti-magic shell, you have turtle, you have ice block, you have all these things, bubble, there's so many ways of defensively protecting yourself. Do not use them in the phases where it's just fighting the boss. Take the damage. It's better you take the damage in the standard phases because when it comes to putting the code in, your magnetic arm might be right next to where you need to press a button. You're going to need the defensive there. That's where you're going to need it because your healer will not be able to keep up because while all that is going on with the arm and stuff, there's still Giga Zaps going on. There's still damage going out on the whole raid. It's very, very difficult to heal in the first place. This is why I don't really recommend the healers call it out. Healers can call it out, but they're going to be very focused on other things. I had to use items like the Void Stone and things like that just to tide us over for various phases in order to make sure we could get through this. But if the magnetic arm is coming out and it is when you're going to click the button, you need to position yourself in such a way that you're going to be able to click the button. So what I saw was a lot of people kind of stand around. Again, this big mistake of just standing next to the button, waiting to press it, because they're so panicked and they're so fearful of fucking it up that they're like, I just need to stand here and just wait and click the button when it pops up. You've got to play around it. You have to play around it. The fight is designed for you to do that. Now, what you need to do, of course, when the magnetic arm is pulsing and you need to click, is you need to run to your button, take a little bit of damage from the magnetic arm, which is what you're going to do. Click your button immediately, and just the same as the orbs, move away as fast as possible. Get out of there and stop taking all that damage because you're likely to die and end up in really tricky situations. That's something you don't want to do. Those are the only two things that can really screw you up as long as your team is capable of pushing the button in the first place. Notice who I've said there is not ideal because I know so many people like to pass off the responsibility to somebody else. They don't want the responsibility of looking at the code, calling out the code. They want all that. The tank can do it in phase 1. In phase 2, it is ridiculously hard. They're not being lazy. They're not trying to pass the buck. It's just extraordinarily difficult for them to do it. It can be done, don't get me wrong, but it's way, way harder than just having a mage do it, or a hunter, or even a melee DPS who can come out and take a look at it. Remember, this fight isn't about damage. As long as you're okay with putting the code in, you can do it 7 or 8 times, just like my group did in phase 1, did in its first kill. Have one in the range, do it. Try and leave the healer out. I can't stress this enough. It feels bad, especially if you're the guy who likes to volunteer like myself. Like, I would love to do this, but it really is awkward to do while I'm paying attention to health bars and looking for a code. And also, there's a lot of other things happening at the same time, including my position. It's what my job is a lot more stressful than the guy just doing DPS. It's as simple as that. The guys just doing DPS, for the most part, they don't need to do much of anything. You stand still with Giga Zap. You don't want to use your defensives anyway. All this kind of stuff is just left to everybody else to deal with. You're the guys who's supposed to be doing it. It should be the DPSs, one of your DPSs calling it out, but make sure it's assigned. Don't have a battle for it. Another big problem I saw in streams today was people like having this battle of who was going to call things out, or they'd ask someone to call things out who would do it sometimes and not another. What I found the best system is that you read out and you help each other when the code's actually coming out because it might get missed by someone. So if you see something and the assigned caller doesn't see it straight away, just call it out and say it's blue. Or it's me if you're using names, or it's 3 if you're using numbers. And then it'll get the ball rolling because they're probably looking at the other side. So then you get the code. So it might be blue, yellow, red, purple, right? 3, 2, 1, 4, Bill, Ted, Mike, Andy, right? Whatever the hell it might be. And then you have the one caller read it out as you press the button. This is so important. And another thing to take into account, which I know caused wipes in my second group, and also caused wipes on other groups I saw trying this today, take into account voice comms lag. Because you do have to put the code in quickly when it comes to you. So let's say I'm reading it out. If I go like blue, red, and let's say mine's yellow, right? So I go blue, they press, red, then they press, and I say yellow and I press immediately. Red might not have pressed yet. So if I'm trying to do it quickly, I'm going blue, red, yellow, purple. Like that, I've likely pressed it before the red person's seen it. You've got to build in a little bit of time while you're using voice comms just to allow not only to the message to arrive to them and them to react to it, then you can press it. You do have to press it within 5 seconds, but there is some leeway to that. You're only pressing a button. You can press 3 of these buttons within the space of 2 seconds. You have some time, right? It needs to be quick. Doesn't need to be lightning fast. And I think that's what a lot of people were doing that I saw, is they were trying to do it so quickly so they could get back to the boss and try and zerg it. That's not the strategy you want here. The strategy you're aiming to have is one that we could do this 30 times if we have to, because we can play around all the things that are trying to stop us putting the code in. All we need to do is be aware of how to put in the code, how to make it as easy as possible by not standing right next to the button, making sure the people who are calling it out are doing it in a nice, simple manner. Do all that and you're going to be fine. What you shouldn't do is start blaming other people unless they are actually screwing up and you're doing things correctly. But bear in mind, is the tank tanking the aerial unit like in the middle of the room? Because that's going to screw somebody. I guarantee it. That's going to screw somebody up. Are you seeing people just kind of hang around the button and therefore they're struggling? Because they're going to say things to you like, I couldn't press the button because the orb got me. It's like, well, the orb shouldn't be getting you. You should be not stood near the button so the orb doesn't get you. And that was something I heard a lot on voice comms, is people going, fucking, this fight is so RNG, dude. It's so RNG. The orb got me. It's like, you can totally play around that. Right? That's not a thing that should be struggling with you. The reason I wanted to put this out, by the way, is the Mythic Raiders and the high Mythic Plus players are chomping at the bit to charge you millions of gold for this wonderful flying mount, and I'm hoping I can spare you from that. As much as I would like your gold, I would like you guys to be the ones making it and not me taking it off you. So I hope that works out for you guys. All right? Thank you very much for listening, guys. I hope that helps you out. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.